Hello and welcome to 5MI Weekly. Today let's talk about sex ed. Let me begin with asking you a question. On a scale from 1 to 10, with 1 being unimportant and 10 being most important, how would you rate the importance of sex education? As you're contemplating what this number might be, I want you to take a look at a graphic, which is filled full of modern-day, seemingly unrelated personal, psychological, societal, and economical problems. But tell me, what do you think all these problems have in common? The answer is sexual illiteracy. Sexual illiteracy, or being sexually ignorant, causes problems ranging from sexually transmitted infections and unwanted pregnancies, to body shaming and depression, to poverty, domestic violence, and sexual assault. Sex education is the only way to combat sexual illiteracy. Now, what was I asking you again? Oh yeah, I remember. On a scale from 1 to 10, with 10 being most important, how important is sex education? Regardless of what you think sex education's level of importance is, one thing is obvious about it. Sex education is controversial. But what's not so obvious is whether sex education needs to be controversial. It looks like we have a lot to talk about when it comes to sex education. So let's spend 5 episodes of 5MI Weekly figuring out what exactly sex education is and what makes it so controversial. Despite it being controversial, sex education has quite a few consistencies within it. But one of its consistencies, frankly, irritates me to all beyond. Every time I hear someone talking about sex education, they seem to think it's necessary to talk in code that's littered with metaphors, euphemisms, and allegories. If this is what you're looking for, I need to apologize to you right here and now. Because when I'm talking about sex education, I don't use coded language. And to be completely honest with you, when I hear people talk like this, it makes me want to say, a unicorn is not gender. Having tea is not sexual consent. A sock is not a condom. Getting to third base is not oral sex. And for God's sakes, a banana is not a penis. Talking in code doesn't make things cute or more understandable. It makes things confusing. This reminds me of a classic comedy bit Steve Martin used to do about playing a trick on a 3-year-old.
If you have a 3-year-old kid and you want to play a dirty trick on him, whenever you're around him, you talk wrong. So now it's like his first day in school and he raises his hand. May I mumble dog face to the banana patch?
If we're going to understand sex education, we can't use language filled with riddles and wrapped in enigmas. So let's just focus on doing one thing in this first episode on sex education. Let's simply just define what education is, using plain and straightforward language. Education is the systematic giving or receiving information for the purpose of it being learned and applied. Best illustrated as a continuum, education has different types. One end of the continuum has education that is minimal in its content, its expectations of learning, and its applications, while the other end of the continuum has education that is comprehensive in content, learning, and applications. How important a topic is to be learned drives the type of education to be employed. If a topic is unimportant, then minimal education can be used. If a topic is very important, then often comprehensive education is required. For example, let's say you want to learn how to drive an automobile. How important would you deem this learning topic? Before you go answering, bear in mind a few things about driving. You'll be driving for the rest of your life. In one way or the other, driving will affect everyone you know. You'll drive for yourself, for family, for leisure, for work, or just because you're bored. You'll learn how fun driving is, and you'll likely want to do the things associated with this fun repeatedly. And you'll also learn the dangers of driving, and you'll know how to avoid these toxic things. So what do you think? Does the importance of learning how to drive allow for minimal education, or does it demand comprehensive education? While you're thinking about your answer, let's learn something else. How about you want to learn how to sew a button on a shirt? How important is this learning topic? Before you answer this question, bear in mind you're not a tailor. You rarely wear button-down shirts. You're much more into Velcro, and you love zippers. So what do you think? Does learning how to sew a button on a shirt allow for minimal education, or does it demand comprehensive education? While you're thinking about the importance of buttons, let's learn one last thing. How about you want to learn about sex? How important is this learning topic? Before you answer this question, bear in mind you're a sexual being your entire life. Consciously or unconsciously, your sexuality affects everyone you know. You'll be sexual for lots of different reasons. For yourself, for family, for leisure, for health, or just because you're bored. You'll learn how fun sex is, and you'll likely want to do the things associated with this fun repeatedly. And you'll learn the dangers of sex, and you'll know how to avoid these toxic things. So what do you think? Does the importance of learning about sex allow for minimal education, or does it demand comprehensive education? Sex is a little more complicated to think about than just driving or buttoning. So how about I give you a week to come up with your answer? And I promise, in a week's time, I'll share with you what others have to say about answering this question. Till next week.